When you're the leader and you're dealing with law enforcement, if the wrong misinformation gets out there, that becomes the new story.
They just received a new organ. They should be able to live a healthy life and not be boggled down by, can I pay for my meds this month?
People know what was going on and still be relatively healthy, or as healthy as you can be with the dialysis machine. Law enforcement, it's child welfare, and it's education. Those are the three pillars that are being looked at right now. As society and as government, we're learning that it's more cost effective if we can tell better stories. It's one thing to talk about it, but to live it, it was taxing, to say the least.
I didn't want the pity, I didn't want the sympathy either. So that's another reason why I didn't share my story with a lot of people until, finally came down to it and I said, okay, you know what, enough is enough. I got to put it out there.
Check with your insurance to make sure if
this is covered.
If it's covered. Mm-hmm. And then she spoke on the prices of some of the medication, which are incredibly expensive.
The reason why I found out about that, I went to the doctor for one particular issue, and literally test after test after test, and that's when I found out, Jennen, you are going to be going through kidney failure. Do you feel any pressure while being the chief of police and, navigating this journey? I know you had a great support system with your wife, but was there any pressure that you just,
Welcome to the Green Table Talk, where we will have open and honest discussion about transplant. I'm your host, Jennen Johnson.
Welcome to the Green Table Talk. I am your host, Jennen Johnson. Today, I am extremely ecstatic and happy to introduce to you my next guest. I currently am speaking with the former Toronto Police Chief, Mr. Mark Saunders. Mr. Saunders, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Jennen. Glad to be here.
This is the time that if we were live, I'd be applauding, so I'm going to applaud anyways online because this is what you deserve. This is exactly what you deserve. So thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy, so thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today. Like I said, I'm ecstatic that you're here, and I'm excited and anxious to jump into your story. So let's get a little background knowledge about Mr. Saunders. I'd like to find out, hobbies, sports. Do you partake in sports? Do you like watching sports? Give us a little inside scoop on Mr. Mark Saunders.
Thanks, Jennen. So I can tell you that since I've retired, which has been close to 2 years now, the pandemic has really changed a lot of things that my family and I would normally do. So a lot of time when I do have free time has been spent watching reality TV. But I also watch a lot of UFC fighting. My background growing up was kickboxing. I was a professional kickboxer for quite some time. And so it's a sport that I really truly understand the discipline. And so I tend to watch a lot of UFC when I do have those moments to myself.
That's great. So you are definitely someone that you do not want to encounter in an alley. Because you've got that background knowledge.
Well, I guess it depends on what side you are in the alley, right?
Okay.
So, if I'm there to help, then it's all good. If I'm not there to help, then it might not be so good.
Now, you've touched upon reality television. In my household, my husband tends to blame me for the reality television watching. And he said, I'm only watching because you're watching. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. So with yourself, is that the same situation? You're only watching because Stacy's watching, or you actually want to watch?
No, I'm blatantly attracted to reality TV. So I tend to bring her along. And you know what? I don't have to think. For 38 years, in the last 5.5 years sitting in the seat of chief, you tend to have your TV glued to CP24 or CBC or CTV, not having to worry about that anymore because the news doesn't have any impact on my life. I've gone to the extreme opposite where I just don't have to think at all. So
that's good.
It's fun at times, but I do keep busy enough. So there really isn't a whole lot of time for the reality TV stuff.
Mm-hmm. I understand. It's true. Like you said, you're retired now, so it's your time to kick back and relax and unwind, right? So hats off to you on that.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of other things on the go, but I certainly do have more time. than I had as the chief of police.
Beautiful. And we will definitely touch upon that as well. I'd love to know what else you're doing as well.
Sure.
So let's just dive into this. You had a kidney transplant. Myself personally, I had a kidney transplant as well. And the reason why I found out about that, I went to the doctor for one particular issue, and literally test after test after test. And that's when I found out, what, Jennen, you are going to be going through kidney failure. You have issues with your kidney. So that was my journey. What was your journey? How did you find out about this?
Well, I found out accidentally. I think it was in the mid to late 90s. I was at the emergency task force at the time, and not as a supervisor. I wound up being a supervisor running a gun team, but this is as a constable. And I had some real severe abdominal cramps, and I wasn't sure what it was. I was at work. They said, go home and look after it. I wound up going to a GP. He prescribed me with some, I don't know if it was anti-inflammatory. Anyway, gave the wrong medication, didn't do anything. I wound up going to the hospital, and it started out with high blood pressure, and they weren't sure what the cause was. After all the tests, I was in the hospital for several days. But going through all of the examinations, the one thing that they found out was that I had only had one functional kidney. So at birth, one kidney did not, how they grow and migrate? It didn't migrate, it didn't grow, it just stayed right there. So when you're looking for that kidney, it took them a long time because it was very close to the spine, I guess, and was tiny. And so, but they saw that my numbers weren't that great. But I went along, and things were okay for a multitude of years. And then, the thyroid shut down. And so it was this progressive thing. And then when I wound up with the nephrologist to determine the fact that I had kidney disease, it took quite a while before I wound up having to go through the dialysis component. When I was at the renal clinic, the trends were that my numbers were dropping. But then what happened was it dropped, but then it plateaued and it stayed at, I forgot what number, but for a really, really long time. And it took a couple of years before it got to the point where I needed the peritoneal dialysis.
Now, did you know before this test that you only had one kidney, or that was like news to you?
No, I mean, I was in my, I guess, 30s. I'm not good at math, but I think I was in my 30s when I realized that my whole life I was only functioning with one kidney.
Wow.
And you don't know, and as you know, you can live a healthy life with a kidney, but I also had renal disease, and so hence the team had to come in, with your dietitian, your pharmacist, your doctor, nursing staff, and all of those things to monitor and watch. And it was a journey for quite some time before I actually got to the transplant.
Wow. So you said that you were doing peritoneal dialysis. Why did you choose this form of dialysis?
Well, because, at the time I was a chief, and I was healthy enough to do that. And it was a matter of being hooked up to that machine for 8 hours a day, every single day. And that was the one that fit my lifestyle the best. Gotcha. It allowed me the opportunity of really, nobody knew that I was going through renal disease for quite some time. And so, still running the organization, and making sure that I planned my schedule around ensuring that I had that 8-hour window at all times, so that I could still function on my day-to-days, not have people know what was going on, and still be relatively healthy, or as healthy as you can be with the dialysis machine.
Of course.
I had my wife trained with me on how to use the machine, and that was really critical, because we had it down to a system where if I had a late night then she would have it set up so that as soon as I got home, I'd literally just charge right up and plug into the machine. So between her and I, we were able to look after it to the best of our abilities, and it was private at the time, and some inconveniences. And I use the term lightly when you've got renal disease. Anything to keep you alive really shouldn't be considered an inconvenience. But we lived in an older house. It was built in 1931 at the time. So, small rooms, small hallways. And the amount of fluid that you have to go through on a monthly basis really occupied a lot of real estate in the house. And it was tough whenever I had to go on trips because of the fact that, you have to bring the machine with you, and the solutions are at the destination that you're going to.
Yes.
And so there's always this uncanny feeling when you're on the plane going, my goodness, I hope that it's there at the end of the day. And it's one thing to talk about it, but to live it, it was taxing, to say the least. And in my position, I had quite a few times where I had to travel, and nobody really knew, so I was keeping it to myself. And so, how to keep getting the machine on and make arrangements with the hotels that I'd be at or wherever I was staying at. It was complex for a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Wow. So question for you, why did you keep it to yourself? I mean, I'm assuming immediate family knew, right? So why did you keep it to yourself?
Yeah, so, I guess I can work it from hindsight in the sense that I was glad that I was able to do it. I can talk about near the tail end when I was coming in. Once I knew I was getting the transplant, I needed to make sure that I had a couple of months clear so that I could designate somebody to be deputy chief so that the business continuity could maintain and so that I'd have the time to recover. And so, one or two more people kind of got let into the circle, and people that I entrusted. And I remember it was just a couple of days after I spoke to a few people, I got a phone call from a colleague in one of the divisions who had heard rumors that I was on life support and are you okay, this, that, the other. So, the work grapevine, every industry has one. I'm sure you have one as well too.
Yes.
And, when you're the leader and you're dealing with law enforcement, if the wrong misinformation gets out there, that becomes the new story. And not about skills and ability, but oh my goodness, this is a dire straight moment for this individual. And by the time you try working out, no, I'm not dying, the cat's out of the bag. So I knew that, the fewer people that knew, the better it was, that I could actually maintain my role, still perform, not have to deal with any distractions. And then when it was a couple of days before, when I knew I was going into the hospital, that was when I wound up. I set something up with one of the major media outlets and said, look, here's the story, you can have it. I wanted to control the story. I didn't want the story to control me. And especially when I'm in the hospital, incapacitated, if I didn't have ownership on it, then who knows where it would have gone. So I wanted to make sure I had absolute control from start to finish, and I didn't want the story to take lead on me. So that was the primary reason why. And it worked out well at the end of the day, I think. And,
definitely. I saw that interview as well. I thought that was well done. I think that was a good idea to just, like you said, like keep it within yourself, close immediate family, and that, because it definitely could have spun out of control. Like you said, all of a sudden, Mark Saunders this, and, the chief of police, he's, on, like you said, on his deathbed, or he only has, 2 fingers left, or whatever the scenario is, right? People have a tendency of spinning things out of control. So
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So did you feel any pressure? Like, you were the chief of police at that time, you're going through, dialysis, going through renal failure, you're keeping up appearances, you're still going here and there. Did you feel any pressure while being the chief of police and, navigating this journey? I know you had a great support system with your wife, but was there any pressure that you just, whether it was unbearable or you just really wished geez, I wish this wasn't my scenario, you know? Talk about the pressure of that.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of journeys, right? So first and foremost, once you understand that you've got renal disease, it means your kidney's deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes too much information can be a dangerous thing. And
Yeah.
so at the start, when you start doing research and you're looking into, you know, okay, what can I do to slow it down or stop it from happening? And there's so many different things, you know, if you drink this, you take so much of this, or you have this in the morning and this at night. And I remember the doctor sitting down because I was talking about, I can't remember what the home remedy nonsense was, but I was telling me, you know, if I do this, what do you think? And he sat me down and he basically said, okay, you know, he said, picture this, you got a basketball. I said, okay, so the basketball's your kidney. Okay, yeah. And he goes, okay, now I'm holding a baseball. I go, yeah. And he goes, you got a baseball. So if you're going to be taking all of these things to get back to being a basketball, do you see what doesn't make sense? And so once he gave me that analogy, then I slowed down and started, okay, this is what it is. You know, rely on the experts, rely on the science, listen and comply. And so once I did that, it was better. It was tough juggling. I will admit, it was tough juggling. And it was also tough going on. I had one vacation while I was on dialysis, and it was it was in Mexico. And I remember I had the extension cords or the extension connectors so that I could have the machine in, but I could go out to the balcony and sit down and look outside type thing. But when you've got the catheter in, you can't go in water, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yep.
So there's some inconveniences. And then you stop having the pity party. And you start thinking about other people that in other countries that wouldn't have access to the medical care and treatment that we have here. And then you start to realize, you know what, really lucky. And you look at today, that type of technology didn't exist back in the day. So having the access of, you know, going through this and also being at home, I turned it around from that pity party to being really grateful that I had the opportunity of staying alive.
Mm-hmm. So your story sounds quite similar to mine in that sense, because I did the exact same thing. I didn't tell a lot of people either. And I had the pity party as well. And when it came to, you know, dialysis and what have you, I just tried to juggle and do the best that I could because I'm a mom. You know, I was working at the time and my workplace didn't know what was going on. I didn't feel secure enough to let them know, right? And so that's quite similar, you know, between the both of us. I didn't want the pity. I didn't want the sympathy either. So that's another reason why I didn't share my story with a lot of people until, you know, finally came down to it. And I said, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. I got to put it out there. And I was also told to help fix those kidneys, you got to cleanse and juice and fast and do all this crazy stuff. And I was, you know, when you were talking about the basketball and the baseball, I'm like, that resonated so much because I'm thinking, yeah, all I had to do at that time was just, you know, juice for like 3-4 days and my kidneys fixed, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that doesn't work, right?
Yeah. And, you know, I guess if someone had told me that sooner, not that there's anything that I could have done. I mean, my kidneys are deteriorating, whether I like it or not. Maybe the journey might have been a little bit easier.
Yes.
But I mean, you keeping it secretive, I think psychologically there is, whether people like to admit it or not, it is a world of survival of the fittest. And the moment there's any sign of a vulnerability, then it just makes it easier to be vulnerable. And so, you know, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are going through this that will keep it secretive. You know, I guess there'll be a day and point in time where that won't be such a big deal. But right now, you it's very competitive, and you want to be at par with everybody, and you don't want to be put in a deficit, whether real or manufactured. And having that, I mean, yes, there are restrictions, but I mean, at work, I don't have to jump into a pool.
Yes.
And all these factors, I can still function 100%. It's not like my brain has deteriorated. But if you have that anvil hanging around your neck, and everybody knows, then it does change the performance of everybody around you. And yeah, and you know, someone else is going to look at that spot.
Exactly. Agreed. 100%. So were you ever placed on the living organ donor list or the deceased list?
Yeah, so once my kidneys got to 11%, I think it was 11%, that was when I got put on the list. Okay. And I got you know, they educated me on the live donor list and how that works and everything. And I have 5 other brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And so when I came home and told my wife that, she went, okay, that's great. You have to go through me first. And I was like,
so did you even have a chance to mention it to your siblings? Like ask them if they're willing to donate?
No, she said, and I kind of thought it was, you know, I kind of laughed it off a little bit. You know, my wife is white. And so I went, all right, if you want to do it, go ahead. I've got 5 brothers and sisters, but just to appease her, I went, okay, well, sure, let's, you know, I've got 11% to go. So let's go through this hurdle first. And, you know, lo and behold, she came back a perfect match. So we're both blown away by it. It was very cool.
I find that amazing. That is amazing. So literally your first shot, your wife tried out and she was a match. Myself, I know there's multiple people that came out and tried and it didn't work. But your first shot, you didn't even have to ask anybody else. At your first shot, here is your donor.
Yeah, and I tell you, with that comes a bit of guilt. Because I've heard other stories and other journeys, and I know in real life there's some people that don't have the opportunity. So I was really lucky. I don't ever take that for granted for a single minute. I will say that was the silver lining in the whole journey, was the fact that right out of the gate, my wife, of all people, would come back a perfect match. It's almost like I had preordained it. I married someone to make sure that one day I may need a kidney.
Right.
But you know, for the record, I didn't know that my renal disease was to the point where I'd need a transplant. I've known her for 20 years now, so that was not my master plan.
So now you've mentioned that, you know, your wife was a perfect match, which is amazing. Were you scared at any point? Because let's face it, you're both going under the knife. You're going into surgery. It's a serious surgery. It takes, you know, several hours. Were you at any point scared or, you know, hesitant? You didn't want her to do it at one point because, you know, heaven forbid, it doesn't turn out the way that you'd like?
You know, I think anyone that knows my wife knows that wasn't an option. So once she was in, she was all in, and that wasn't going to change. I felt, you feel a little nervous. I can see why it would be tough for someone that you know gives you an organ. There is some guilt. The guilt was post-surgery, watching my wife recover from the surgery. I don't know about you, but when I had the kidney transplant, I noticed a difference right away. I mean, I still felt like I got run over by a pickup truck, but I felt better right away. Mentally, I had more energy, which became physical, having more energy. My skin was really, really dry. Especially with the dialysis, really, really dry. That stopped. There was no more scratching and itching. I just felt overall better. It was noticeable, but I was still recovering. But, you know, the person donating the kidney is a healthy person that is now one organ less. So they're not going to feel better. And so there's guilt with that.
Yes.
But we were a team going through, so we supported one another throughout the whole journey. And so, you know, if I was up, I'd pick her up, and if she was up, she'd pick me up, type thing, throughout the journey. Because, you know, there were some bad days, you know, because you're still working, doing stuff, and so I was lucky that I had my partner to lean on, and vice versa as we went through those obstacles.
That's amazing. I agree. You have to have a good support system, and the fact that your wife would not, like, even if you said no, she's not taking no for an answer. So that's, you know, she's like you said, she's in it for the long haul.
Yeah. No, it's very. It was cool.
Reassuring, right? That, you know, she's in it, right? Myself personally, when I came out of surgery, I was told that I was glowing and my face, you know, looked, you know, healthier and all this other good stuff. That was actually my next question I was going to ask you, you know, about how you felt, and the fact that, you know, you didn't feel as dry, and you didn't feel the way you felt, you know, before surgery, right? Even though you just came out of surgery, you know, you still felt rejuvenated, which is very good.
Yeah, and the skin color changed right away too.
Yes.
There was kind of a yellowish tinge before, and that was gone instantly. Yeah.
So let's talk about the day of surgery. So what date did you have your surgery?
October, I believe it was October 2nd, 2017.
Gotcha. Okay. So day of surgery, any nervousness? I mean, of course you had to be a million things were going through your mind. You know, did you just kind of meditate and just, you know, calm yourself? Like, what was your process? Let's take us through the day of.
So I mean, I came in the night before, did the blood work and all those other things. You know, when I came in, I was more thinking about what opportunities I would have that I didn't have before. So, A, feeling better, B, if I wanted to go in a pool, I could, just the things that I couldn't do, that I'd be able to do. And then with the diet, there's so many different things. And the one thing that I'll say is that, you know, everybody's different, especially when it comes to the diet. I didn't understand the value of the nutritionist.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, food can kill you. And so there's a reason why there is a dietitian. There's a reason why there is a pharmacist, and you have to listen to them all of the time.
Yes.
And so I remember at one point in time where I wanted to get healthy while I was on a dialysis. And so I curbed different foods, and then I'd have this salad for breakfast, this vegetable or this fruit salad for breakfast, and then I do this in the afternoon. And it turns out that because of I think it was mangoes and something else, my potassium was going through the roof. And what was cool was you don't notice it, but you're doing a blood work.
Yes.
And then next thing you know, while you're working,
everything shows up in that blood work.
Yeah. So the phone call comes in, it's a nutritionist. You know, we've got a bit of an issue. Have you changed your diet? And you're sitting there going, wow, how did she figure that out? And you go, yes, I did. What have you done? And you explain it. And then she goes, okay, well, you got to cut this, and this out, and then come back in 3-4 days and do the test again.
Yes.
And so getting on, when I knew that I'd have a transplant, I knew that food and nutrition would be important, but not as much life or death.
Yes.
And because your body's going to be stronger. So I was always thinking about the positive components of it. I wasn't overly nervous. I was concerned about my wife a lot, and how she would be going through this. So that was my biggest anxiety, was the fact that I've now brought my partner into this whole thing. And you know, in real time, it was a little bit antsy for a while, but then, you know, as you start recovering, things start to align a little better. And when it's a husband and wife that are both gone through major surgery, you know, hindsight, the whole house shuts down.
Yes.
And we had a little boy that we had to look after. And so that was tough for the first couple of weeks, but, you know, friends and neighbors chipped in and helped with certain meals and things like that. So there was a support system that if we had not had that, it would have been incredibly difficult,
of course,
to go through. But you know, TGH, they're so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And the patient experience is fantastic because there are no surprises, and they tell you what's going on, what's going to go on, and they give you some insider tips to help you out. And I guess the number one thing they'd say, which they said to me, say to you, stay in front of the pain, was critical. And so while in the hospital, even just before, my anxiety was geared towards my wife. I was just, let's just get this done.
Yes. Was there any serious post-operation complications for either yourself or your wife?
Yeah, I did have some complications, which took a little bit longer.
To heal?
No, it dealt with the drainage.
Okay.
There were some drainage issues, so they had to redo that, and there was some discomfort for when I got out. It took about another week to stabilize things, and so there's some back and forth, but we were always ahead of it. And the recovery took a little bit longer, but listen, the end game, I was always focused on the end game, and so it worked out. It worked out.
Is there anything that you couldn't eat beforehand, but now you can since you've had the surgery?
Yeah, I wasn't eating.
And not necessarily, let me just clarify, not because it's restricted, like, as you know, we're not allowed to touch salt, and, there's restrictions because of, the fact that we were going through kidney failure. But I used to be able to eat tomatoes and I could eat cucumbers, but now, like, since the surgery, I can do that again. But prior to the surgery, I couldn't touch with a 10-foot pole for whatever reason. Anything like that?
Bananas, mango. There are a couple of things. For me, it was mostly fruit.
Gotcha.
It was mostly fruit. And it was tricky because you get caught off guard the odd time. But overall, the restrictions were not too many for me before.
Okay. Yeah. For me, it was vegetables. Like, I couldn't touch a lot of the vegetables. And like you said, you're so used to doing it that you just reach for it. And after you eat, it's like, oh, shoot. You realize after the fact, right? So it's interesting.
Yeah, and there's no way you can make a double boiled potato taste good, right?
Right.
So you just push potatoes out of the way for a bit. And,
exactly.
And spinach.
Spinach is something else that you couldn't eat?
Yeah, I had to eat them, I think raw.
Oh,
raw,
wow.
not boiled. And there was a third one, but they're all easy to kind of work around.
Okay, so I didn't get that one, thank goodness. The spinach. So I want to ask you this question. With the ACB community, we've discussed, like, many times on this show, why is it that they're reluctant or hesitant to donate or come out and get tested or anything of that sort? They're very reluctant in that area. What's your thoughts on that? Why do you think our community is hesitant when it comes to donating, or whether it's signing the donor card, or whether it's, getting tested for whichever, or blood work, donating blood? Why do you feel that is?
I would, a couple of reasons. That the first one is going to be trust. And I don't think that can be denied. There is a lack of trust with people of color in any industry. Health industry especially is one of them, and so that definitely is one of the factors. Number two, I think, is I think we have to change the way in which we do business, because with the donating organs piece, it's an afterthought to your driver's license, right?
Yeah.
People are in there for their driver's license. They're not in there to donate. And so the angst of getting a picture, this, that, the other, and there's usually a lineup, and you want to get your picture, you want to get that piece of paper, you want to get out. And so when you go through all of that stuff, and all of a sudden it's, oh, and by the way, most people are like, forget about it, I want out of here. So we really have to, I think, educate people a lot better, and I think we have to pick a better platform to ask people. But having said that, I was fortunate. My timing was fortunate because while I was going through my kidney ordeal, at the same time in Chicago, the chief of Chicago, Eddie Johnson, who's also a Black man, he was going through it as well. And he got caught off guard. So my transplant was in October of 2017. And what happened was in August of 2017, Eddie, he had collapsed at a press conference. And then he basically disclosed that he was undergoing some medical issues and he needed a kidney transplant. At the end of it, it was his son, I believe, that gave him his kidney. Okay. But I was able to follow him through the journey. And it was kind of neat because I was watching him vicariously, understanding our demographics are fairly close. Chicago is Toronto's sister city.
Yes.
When it comes to size and volume of law enforcement, Toronto is the fourth largest law enforcement agency. So you have New York, then you have LA, then you have Chicago, and then you have Toronto. And so I was able to vicariously watch what Eddie was going through. Eddie didn't know that I was going through exactly what he's going through, but he got exposed because of that. Mm-hmm. And then I had my transplant a couple of months later, and he and I connected and went through lots of discussions. But at one point in time, I got asked to go to Chicago and speak on the journey that I took. And I spoke with Eddie because the Kidney Foundation, or the Live Donor Foundation in Chicago, when they sat me down and spoke with me, they said that this is something that is important. If we could have two Black men that could get up there and say this is okay, it was something that was critical to them because their stats were showing that the live donor piece, specifically with the Black community, was the lowest and had historically been the lowest. And they were looking for different reasons as to why. And their research showed the primary cause was lack of trust, not trusting the institutions. And so they went to see, was there more to it than just that? And so they checked and looked at the socio-economical similarities, and they took the Latino community because they kind of lived in the same neighborhoods and demographics and all of this. And they found that the community there, when it came to live donations, like 18-20%. Yet with the Black donations, it was, I don't remember the number, it was single digit. I'm thinking either 3 or 6%.
Much
so
lower.
Phenomenally low.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that would translate to here as well, too. It's not a discussion that any household would have,
yes,
but it's lesser of a discussion to be held in houses of people of color. And so the more the stories are told, the more that people hear and see us telling our stories, the more that they can get involved. And, knowledge is the strongest tool that you could ever have. And what's great about Ontario is the fact that you can go on that live list and help loved ones. Because before, people go, oh, I wish I could help, but I can't. Sorry about your luck. Well, no, now you can.
Yes.
Because by getting on that list, you can bump that person you care about up that ladder. And so it was interesting to see that, this is not something that's isolated to Toronto. This is something that's going on everywhere. So we really need to make more people aware and knowledgeable.
Education as well, right? Like we need to educate our community as well and explain to them that, no, if you do donate, I heard when I was, looking for a donor, a lot of people came back and said, I'd like to help out Jennen, but I'm fearful that if I donate, then it's going to shorten my lifespan. Or if I donate, what happens if my brother or my sister, years from now, they need a kidney or they need an organ? And I think that, education is definitely key in this situation.
Yeah, well, listen, in life, it's always easy to find an excuse why not to do something.
Yes.
But I agree with you that the more knowledge we can give people, the better the chances for people to make a good, solid, informed decision. And, I've reached out to various people, and I've had a few people call back and say, thank you, because of that, I've done this or I've done that, which, has made me feel good, but it's also made me aware that the message has to continuously go out there. And I think something has to be better than just sign the back of this or say yes or no to this, if we're really going to do it, because there are too many live, healthy organs that are getting buried. And every time you're doing that, it's somebody's life that is put in jeopardy. And I really do, I will say that humanity is a lot better than what most people think. And if more people have a fulsome understanding of the impact of what they do and what it can and can't do, I think more people will participate. And in Ontario, getting on that list, not many places have that. So we've got that extra layer.
Yes.
Every person I spoke to had no idea about it.
Yes.
I didn't know about it until I was at that 11th hour, and here's what can be done. So I do think that Canadians have bigger hearts than most other countries. And we have to figure out the how to communicate the message. What we're doing now, I think, is lazy. And I think we have to change that to get some more clear numbers and involvement.
Agreed. When I got my transplant, I felt that I had to do more. I felt that I couldn't just take this gift, this blessing, and just walk away and that's it. So I've joined, different, different groups and just try to spread the word and just share my story, try to make a difference somehow. What would you say that you've done since your transplant to try to make a difference? Whether it's within the community, whether it's spreading the word, what would you say you've done?
We've both my wife and I, we've keynoted at different places. And as I told you, Chicago, same thing, went out there, we keynoted there. And so we've made ourselves available and we've gone through our story and it's good having Stacy because she can speak as the donor. And so you get that full perspective as well too. And we're pretty fair about it. It's no, it's not a paper cut, but you know what? In a couple of weeks, you're good. You're good to go. And she can help get rid of some of the myths that are out there. So and of course with my story as well too. And then with the added layer of being a person of color, with our community, high blood pressure and a whole bunch of other things.
Diabetes, high blood pressure.
Yeah. So when we talk about those organs, these are organs that are necessary. We really do have to help each other out.
Definitely. What else do you have on the go right now, Mr. Saunders?
Oh, work-wise, so I mean, I'm doing the Ontario Place, I'm the special advisor for the Ontario Place redevelopment. So it's a chance to work with the provincial government and, Ontario Place. We emigrated to Canada in 1967 and we moved into the GTA, I think it was in 69.
From Jamaica, correct?
Well, my parents were born in Jamaica, but then they moved to England. So 3 of the 6 kids, including me, were born in England. The older 3 were born in Jamaica. And so I had, grade 2 was when I had my first experience with Ontario Place. And it wasn't through my parents. We were first generation. We didn't have the money for that type of luxury. It was a friend who took me to, invited me to his birthday party, and it was to go out to Ontario Place. And I remember how magical it was. And so when I heard about the redevelopment opportunity, I figured, you know what, I certainly would like to be a part of that. And hopefully the final product will create those memories for families and individuals. And hopefully the same impact that I had when I first came. So I'm doing that. And then I'm sitting on a bunch of different boards, including the UHN Board of Trustees. So I've been there now since I retired.
Excellent. I took my daughter to Ontario Place when she was 3 years old, and it was like the best thing to her. She was her eyes just lit up. It was like, there was nothing better than Ontario Place. So I'm really happy that you're taking part in this initiative so other children could experience that joy and happiness as well. And adults too. Like Ontario Place is good for adults as well, right? Yeah,
I think when you see the redevelopment project, it's going to be all ages. And I think that's what's going to be great about it. So we hope to bring the magic for everybody that has the opportunity of coming to Ontario Place. And what we have now versus what we had before is the first Ontario Place was built for everybody, but there weren't necessarily the vehicles to communicate, to get input. Now with the digital platforms and things like that, we're hearing from everybody. Every piece of Ontario has an opportunity to add value to what they see Ontario Place and how they would use it. And so I really do think that this version is going to be one that's going to last a very long time. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds great. Can't wait.
Yeah, me neither.
So now you've had your transplant, several years back in 2017, you said, correct?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you feel at this point?
Really good. I mean, the journey at the start, you do get a little frustrated because you're going in and doing blood work. But the blood work is your lifeline. And, as time goes on, you go less frequently. I'm now down to 4 tests a year.
Oh, wow.
And so all I can say is, follow the science to the best of your ability. Listen to your staff. When it comes to you internally, they'll know you better than you. And so, and then measure your successes and your recovery I did it in monthly increments, because if you do it daily or weekly, the road to recovery takes some time.
Yes.
And your head can get into a bad space if you are trying to measure in too short frequencies.
Yes.
But after a period of time, you start to see the difference, and you get the medication balance, right? Because it's tough at the start because they're trying to find the right medical cocktail for you.
Yes.
And so there's ups and downs, and it can kind of mood swing you a little bit, but it does get stabilized. So you have to wait until it gets stabilized. And then that's when you can really start seeing the quality of life enhancing. You can really feel a difference of how you feel. And you're a better human being to others as well, too, once you're starting to feel good. Yeah,
definitely. Speaking of blood work, I was in the hospital getting my blood. This is several years back, and I was getting blood work done, and everyone is watching television. As I also go to, Toronto General Hospital, and everybody's watching TV and what have you. And then all of a sudden, the room just got quiet, and I was on my phone at the same time. So, but you hear the background noise, right? So I was on my phone, and I was like, "What is going on?" So I'm looking around. It was just quiet, and then I see you walking in to the lab, and you had security with you, and everybody was just like staring and looking and watching. I'm like, oh, it's Chief Saunders. Okay, I felt that was my moment of joy at that point, because so he's getting his blood work just like me, so you're a regular person just like me, and it felt good. And you went in, you got your blood work done. You didn't even have to wait for your number to come up.
Oh no, I can tell you, I did wait for my.
You waited, right?
Yeah. I would get it early and then leave and then come.
And then take off.
So, and it's nice now because now you got a mask on, a ball cap, and no security. In and out, and you're like a fly on the wall, which is great.
Yes, that's amazing. Mr. Saunders, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I'm so happy that you took the time out to share your journey with us, and let everybody else that's watching, let them know that what they're going through, you went through as well. It's not just, secluded just to them. This is part of the journey. I'm glad you shared your knowledge and let everybody know that this is what you should do, and listen to the doctors. And because I know when I started, wasn't always listening to the doctors. I was kind of going off on my own, but I quickly learned that yes, you need to pay attention to the doctors, and they know exactly what's going on, right? So I'm very happy you took the time to join us today. Very happy.
Thank you. And I just one thing I wanted to add, which I forgot. I can say that my most, challenging moment was, so you go through all the tests to make sure that your body can handle the transplant. So with my wife, she had to do it with a completely different team, so that I couldn't know what's going on with her and she couldn't know what's going on with me, because they want to make sure that, especially when someone they want to make sure that there's no coercion, that you're not, And I remember when they took me down a journey, and they were saying, these are the things you have to do, these are the people you have to see. and the psychologist was the last one. And I remember in my head, everything made sense. Psychologist didn't make sense. And so I passed all the tests and no problem. And then the very last session, I sat down with the psychologist, and she asked me if I had insurance, which I did. And then she gave me, it was an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I don't know if you got that. And it had all of the DINs that needed to be checked.
Yes, yes.
And she said, you know, can you check with your insurance to make sure if
this is covered.
If it's covered. And then she spoke on the prices of some of the medication, which are incredibly expensive.
They're very expensive.
And, you know, when she described that to me, I had this real pit in my stomach. And I remember driving home, and I remember asking myself, you know, what if I'm not covered? And then I had to, in my head, I had this constant debate on, well, if I'm not covered, I can't afford this. If I can't afford this, then I'm just going to have to live with the dialysis machine. And I was fortunate because I was covered. And then I kind of took a step back and said, okay, and again, there are going to be people that aren't covered. You know, what about that single mom? What about this person? And
that's the reality for them, unfortunately. And that's very scary because you come this close. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you come this close and you have a donor and everything looks like it's going perfectly. But then to find out that you won't be able to help maintain this organ because you can't afford the medication, that's a slap in the face. You feel like, you know, you've just dropped, you know, 10 feet under, like you're just, it throws you for a loop.
Yeah, and that was my biggest angst. And that car drive home, once I got home and plugged everything into the computer, I was fine. But then I started to feel there's guilt because I was fortunate enough to pick a profession that, because we go through so much physical activity, you know, we have a good medical plan. But there are going to be people that don't have that. And so I was in that, well, now what? You know?
Yes.
So I hope as time goes on, and I hope as the science advances, which it is, there are opportunities for more people to have the chance to live a normal life.
And not feel restricted because of the medication and they can't afford it. Like they should be able to still live a healthy, they just received a new organ, they should be able to live a healthy life and not be boggled down by, can I pay for my meds this month? Can I pay for my meds in 6 weeks, you know?
Yeah, so that was the one thing that I thought, boy, that hopefully that's a gap that in time, as a country, we can have a look at.
Mr. Saunders, for your journey, did you see anybody else from the ACB community, and besides me in the waiting room getting blood work done? Did you see anybody else along your journey, along the way?
No, I did not actually. Come to think about it, no, I didn't go into that journey. I did. I mean, later on, almost on my way out the door, I met someone who had gone through it as well. And he had been a transplant recipient for 20-something years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was really neat to sit down and speak with him. And, you know, and the science has changed so much. Right? I mean, back in the day, they were using radiation and all kinds of stuff. And so, you know, today's a good day to be alive. And I know that the science and TGH is doing some tremendous things, for the experience for patients to come in, but also for the science to advance in transplant. So it'll be really exciting to see what comes down the line in the years to come.
Of course. Now, myself personally, like I said, I went through TGH as well. Great hospital, no complaints whatsoever. I don't that's where I turned to for everything. But when I was going through my journey, I didn't encounter a lot of people of color that was throughout the hospital. Like, so for example, whether it's someone at, admitting, or, there's this one amazing nurse that I encountered, her name was Brittany. She's just like such a great spirit. I connected with her very well. I used to go get iron infusion. And so she helped me out a lot. But besides Brittany, I didn't really have a lot, like the dialysis team who taught me how to do dialysis. I didn't encounter a lot of people of color. And I thought that along the way, that could have helped. You know what I mean? Like it could have helped. I mean, it still wouldn't change the outcome, of course, but just to see someone there like me, I felt that would have helped. So what do you think we could do to change something like that?
Well, I mean, I think what will be interesting is that, the government implemented race-based data collection 2 years ago. So just my last year in the seat. And a lot of people didn't understand the importance of that because it provides opportunities to tell better stories, right? Mm-hmm. So with the race-based data collection, it's law enforcement, it's child welfare, and it's education. Those are the three pillars that are being looked at right now. And what happens is it provides an opportunity to show connectivity. It provides an opportunity to tell a better story. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you can now identify causations a lot cleaner if the data has the ability of intersecting. So, child welfare, why is there a higher amount of people of color in that system? And then you connect it to education, and then you connect it to the justice system. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go, this is the primary start of things. But as society and as government, we're learning that it's more cost effective if we can tell better stories. And so now if we get into race-based data collection with health, you will see some profound stories. You'll be able to identify causations as to why certain things are happening and why certain things are not happening. So why aren't little boys and girls in certain industries, but they're in more industries than others? And I think as we start learning to measure better, and to measure stories that have value and benefit to communities, we'll get those answers. Of course. But, we're not measuring it right now. So it'd be really difficult, and I'd be guessing, but I do think taking this approach will have some profound impact on stories. I think it'll create a better opportunity to have those increased numbers when it comes to representation, when it comes to participation, and when it comes to being informed and knowledgeable enough to make better informed decisions. And I think we're going to get there because we have to.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
We have to. And we saw that with the vaccination distributions.
Yes.
And so these are all stories that are going to be new for us to create the right measuring matrices to have better conclusions and better representation across the board for all of us.
So there can be change, and there will be change.
Yeah, it's. I'd like to say that there aren't many stories being told about transplants at Black tables, but there aren't many stories being told at any table about transplants until someone that or care about gets you in there. But I will say that there will be a higher number of people of color that need health services a lot more because of the financial demographics, because of the geographical locations where the access to services aren't available. You're finding out later in the game that you need this, therefore you're a higher level that needs better treatment. So we need to tell that better story. It's out there, it exists. And once we start pulling that, I think, Jennen, that there'll be some improvements in that category.
That makes me happy. That makes me
sure.
Because I know, like I said, when I went through it, I didn't see it. And it's good to know that further down the road, someone else won't go through what I went through. You know what I mean? There's going to be someone else there. Like I said, I had Brittany. She was great. But it's good to know that change is coming. basically.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it will be coming. I can guarantee you that.
Excellent. Mr. Saunders, this has been a pleasure. This has been a pleasure. I put it out there and I said I would love to interview you, and here I am interviewing you right now. Before I go, I had one more question for you. I usually ask this question of all our guests. You were very, very blessed, very fortunate to just right out the gate, your wife is a donor, she's a match. You didn't have to, search around and anything of the sort. Do you feel that this was faith-based? Do you think that this is divine intervention? Was it just pure luck? What's your thoughts on that?
No, there has to be some divine intervention on it, just from so many other factors, not just the fact that my wife was a perfect match. I could go on with different stories on how certain things happen. And when it's lucky too many times, then it's more than luck. And so certain things happen for certain reasons that I can't answer. And I'm just glad that I was the recipient of those particular blessings when they did come across my table. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've said thank you so many times, but it's just such an engaging conversation. I just, I could just continue going on and on and on talking with you, but I know your time is precious. So thank you once again for joining us on the Green Table Talk. It was my pleasure. I'm glad you made the time to record this episode with us, and I'm sure it's going to make a difference. Someone out there that's watching, listening to you and your story, it's definitely going to make a difference. Definitely.
I hope so, Jennen, and thank you to you and your team for doing this. It's incredibly important, and this is about saving lives, and saving lives, and there's going to be someone that you know and you love and you care about. So if we can do our part to get the right information out there and the right resources, then it's a good day for all of us. So thank you to you guys for doing it, and I'm glad to be part of it. And if there's anything else that you need from me, please don't hesitate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
This is the time where I usually turn around and give a little nugget of knowledge, word of wisdom to our viewers. Today, which is, a prime example of you, today's nugget of knowledge is to be a source of motivation. Take the time to be that lending ear. Take the time to let someone vent and you just listen. Take the time to give advice, which is literally everything you've done in this episode. So let's try to be that source of motivation. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Green Table Talk, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Thanks, Jennen. Bye.